Maybe you are one of those people who like planning and usually follows through. I am, and I don't procrastinate that much, which means I get things done. And yet, I would get far more done if there weren't a hidden cost to engaging with the world. I call it the narcissism tax, the chaos caused by others, and I'm not talking about ordinary mistakes or human imperfection. That happens to everybody. Those are not the ones that drain us psychologically. What drains us is someone causing harm without taking accountability, unpredictability, situations where you suddenly have to spend 2 extra hours on damage control, explaining yourself again, correcting confusions that should never have existed in the first place. Someone didn't read an email properly or seemingly forgot what was said at the last meeting. At the same time, the one who caused the chaos seeks to control the narrative. Maybe they tell a slightly different story to everyone. The story keeps changing, and they are a professional in reality distortion. And because you assume that no one would do that deliberately, you try to make sense of their reactions. And we often do not want to come across as difficult ourselves, so we try kindly and constructively to sort things out. What is the narcissism tax? The narcissism tax is a concept I've made up to describe a kind of tax in terms of psychological energy that you pay for simply participating in the world, because of narcissism in this world. The reason this concept, narcissism tax, is useful is that it makes the situation less personal. Instead of thinking, why do this kind of things always happen to me? You start expecting for them to happen, to some degree. And you know it is part of participating in this world. You might even learn to budget that extra energy. It is not fair that these things happen, but it applies to everybody's life. Not always the same amount, but the potential of this tax is always there. And this makes the unfairness of these situations slightly more fair. My name is Rebecka. In this video, I will discuss this concept, the narcissism tax, from several angles, and also suggest how you can create fairness in an unfair situation. First, let's try to identify what it is that really drains us in these situations. And now we're talking specifically about narcissism, not diagnosed personality disorders, but narcissistic people. It is irrelevant whether they are diagnosed or not. Let's have a quick look at the criteria of narcissism from DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Grandiose sense of self-importance, fantasies of success, belief in being special, demanding excessive admiration, sense of entitlement, exploitative behavior, lack of empathy, envy of others, arrogance. When we look at this list, pretty much none of these features are the ones that actually hurt us. The traits can be annoying, but they are not what makes us pay this tax. The point is rather the effect they have on their surroundings. What is it that really makes us lay awake at night and makes us pay this narcissism tax in terms of psychological energy, even when the relationship is not particularly close?
What's this thing, this one sign to really kind of that helps you understand whether these patterns actually all add up to narcissism? And I got to tell you, after this many years of doing this, other than the patterns I've already talked about and the stuff we know, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the betrayal, the devaluation, all the stuff we've talked about, this universal signature move in narcissistic people, you ready? It's lack of accountability. That's it.
The lack of accountability is the clearest sign of narcissism, says clinical psychologist Ramani Durvasula. What does this lack of accountability look like? Let's say you work for an organization. Someone from this leadership is supposed to represent the organization at a meeting between different organizations. Let's say it's really important to have a representative present. The topic concerns the future opportunities and financial distribution that affects the professional group. And the narcissistic person suddenly informs that they are traveling and cannot meet. They are already abroad right now, and there is too little time to find a substitute. At that meeting, a vote is being made, and the whole professional group loses some opportunities. And this person never takes accountability and does not even seem to understand the connection, that their actions affect others. They won't take any blame. They do not apologize either. If confronted, they will find a way to put the blame on someone else. And maybe they come across as a nice colleague, and people do not like conflict in general, so people may just accept it. Or most people don't even know about it. This example is fictive, originally based on a real-life situation, but the content is changed. Another example: you have planned an important meeting with someone to discuss a topic, something they did, and they bring external people to the meeting without any warning. Let's say they bring a family member to a professional meeting, their wife or spouse, which frames the meeting completely differently. And they know it, and you are just left confused. This is someone who really needs to avoid accountability, so they bring their spouse. This type of reframing of a situation is a signature move of narcissism. In both these cases, the lack of basic accountability is the problem. Just like Ramani said, how you react to this if you do not know about narcissism is usually as follows. You try to make sense of it. There must be some rational explanation. You don't even think about the possibility that someone would do this deliberately. And because they are very good at hiding their problematic behavior from others and keeping a good image, or they might have a professional role that protects them from being questioned, they are not being held accountable.
I'm sure they mean well. They can just be a little bit difficult sometimes, but they really have a great vision on things. I'm sure they mean well.
So, the narcissism tax, you pay it in different life areas, and the more you engage with the world, the bigger the chance is that these people touch your life in different ways. Ergo, the more you engage, the bigger the tax. Let's make a draft. You are here, and your psychological capacity. Then you have a job. Let's say there are 1 or 2 narcissists at your workplace, or if you are an entrepreneur or sell services, maybe you discover that about 15% of those you collaborate with are narcissistic. Then you live in a neighborhood where there is at least one neighbor who behaves narcissistically. They let their cat out in the hallway, and when someone leaves, the cat gets out of the house, and then they blame the neighbor and write long emails to the board, adding fictive details about why this neighbor is difficult to deal with. Then you have a hobby, and there is one narcissist there. Maybe you have a child and you take the child to kindergarten, and there are some narcissistic parents that you have to collaborate with at parents' meetings or on some project. Let's say they keep changing the plans you had already agreed on. You lose time and you lose sleep over the unpredictability. The more you engage with the world, the higher the likelihood that you will encounter narcissistic individuals. You could also be lucky and encounter none, but most of us do end up in these situations. And all of those examples were fictive, by the way. When you know this, when you educate yourself on narcissism, you learn to validate your experience, also when it is at odds with everyone around you, which is typically the case. That's exactly what they do. They control the narrative to avoid accountability. It is part of the very specific type of chaos the narcissist causes. When you learn to just make a mental note of these situations, like, oh, there's the narcissism tax. Oh well, I guess I will just have to pay the tax and move on. That is a huge mental load taken off your shoulders. When budgeting with this tax, you have already calculated the possible losses of your capacity beforehand, and you have already created a psychological budget for the things that can go wrong. However, there are situations where the tax is very unexpected and simply too high to pay, and it drives you into psychological bankruptcy, and it can take years or even a decade to fully recover your psychological economy. Usually this is the time when you first become aware of narcissism. I will discuss this more in a moment. It will be the background situation for one of the 3 solutions that I describe. So, what do you do with this information? How can you use the idea of narcissism tax to your benefit? Let's be bad for a moment. Let's for a moment follow your internal emotional logic. You want justice. You want to feel symmetry on some level. They can't just get away with it.
You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it! He won't.
So let's give you some justice, but in another way than we usually think about justice. Let others win the battle, you'll win the war. If you want to use words such as winning and losing, but this could also be translated into the phrase, do not touch additional waters. Every time you touch waters to engage with something, you cause new ripples, and your energy is transformed into those ripples. It is very protective if you have overall goals that you are heading toward. The narcissism tax is just a disturbance, and you can minimize the engagement. You do not need to seek to inform them that what they did to you was wrong. They already know. I learned this expression, do not touch waters or additional waters, on social media from somebody else. Anytime you touch additional waters, those waters that are not necessary to touch when you engage trying to explain yourself, you move further away from your goals. When you know about the narcissism tax, it is easier not to touch the bad things, just pass them. And that is also the best way to minimize the tax. Even if it feels counterintuitive in the moment, we are told that we should stand our ground and stick to our boundaries. Yes, but that's exactly what the narcissist wants too, what they want you to do. When you keep things very pragmatic, very short, very clear, then you are not giving them anything to work with. Sure, there are some ways you can make yourself less fuckwithable to begin with and minimize the chances of being a target, but there is no guarantee, and these situations can also be random. Why does this bring you justice? It's a bit unsatisfying, you'll win the war, when they're not necessarily there to witness it. You can train yourself to systematically play the long game and to have a noticing attitude to these situations. When you do this systematically, what you will start to notice is that other people report about the exact same type of chaos in their lives, and they are absorbed by it. So you can imagine these processes like something ongoing all the time, everywhere, and that most people are deep in these waters a lot of the time. By the awareness of the tax, you are minimizing your tax. But this takes a lot of training, including pragmatic choices, giving yourself time to recover from those moments. The recovery is also part of how you budget this tax, by the way. If there is going to be a meeting where you know there are self-righteous narcissists present and you cannot predict the outcome, you give yourself time afterwards to recover. You can give yourself a little gift or do your favorite activity afterwards. And maybe if you know that you will be angry afterwards, you know that you might try to vent your experience to people, and that would also be touching additional waters. That venting can also come back and bite you. It can set off new negative processes in unpredictable ways. I am not saying that you should never vent with people, but that these situations have a very strange quality to them, and people do not always understand narcissism. Maybe they will question your experience and you will be disappointed about their response. So maybe it's better to isolate and self-regulate in some of these situations to prohibit the effects from extending into your other life areas. In the first example, the organization and the meeting about financial distribution or possibilities, let's say it's about artists' royalties, which might literally affect your income if you're an artist. If you do not understand the narcissism tax, you may remain resentful and confused for a long time. This affects your economy too. But since you understand the narcissism tax, you will see this as a cost of participating in life. Life is not fair. Maybe you even learn to think, thank God nothing worse happened. People end up in very bad situations due to narcissism. You can even become lazy in the right way. Lazy in terms of not needing justice, because you are so focused on other goals and things that actually matter. And if there is an actual financial loss, maybe you can develop financial models for yourself in the long run that make you less reliant on systems guarded by narcissists. Maybe you want to start your own business or diversify your income. That is a non-victim mindset. You build yourself up in such a way that you are less affected by the chaos caused by others. You focusing on your long-term goal and turning situations into your personal gain is one way of finding justice. You do not wait for justice, you create justice. The second way you can have justice: if you take such a pragmatic approach, that is often the best way to punish a narcissist and to cause narcissistic injury too. They rely on you engaging emotionally and not realizing what is happening. They need you emotionally entangled. They thrive in that specific emotional energy from you. When you are trying to sort things out and explain, and when you still assume that they are just a person with sincere intentions and you try to make sense of it, you believe there is a misunderstanding, it makes them feel normal and important. Since they lack internal stable regulation, they need the external world to see them in a certain way. So, even if it can feel passive not to straighten up misunderstandings, not trying to get justice, you actually might cause narcissistic injury by not participating. Maybe you figured them out. They don't like that. A good thing about this is that you are not even doing it to get revenge. The third justice principle. This is a bit darker. The examples above do not include the trauma bond, and they are less personal. And the trauma bond, by the way, is not two people being traumatized and thus bonding together, but the word refers to the hot and cold treatment from a narcissist, the way a narcissist conditions you to behave in certain ways and not to challenge them, and how they make you fear rejection and abandonment if you don't behave according to their preferences. The word trauma bond has a very dramatic flavor. I think you have to nod your head a bit when you say this word. Trauma bond.
The trauma bond.
It's about the way they give you the silent treatment if they experience you offending them or even just holding them accountable for something they actually did. They condition you to behave according to their inner narrative. And this can be experienced in both romantic relationships, family relationships, friendships, and in work relationships. I believe these bonds easily form between someone in power who represents some kind of authority figure and those around them. Those around them might want to be seen and recognized by them, so the structure, the potential of a trauma bond is already there. A healthy leader who is non-narcissistic understands this dynamic and doesn't want that power. They don't want to exploit it on a psychological level. About the trauma-bonded individuals, this could be anyone. You do not need to be particularly traumatized from childhood for this being developed in a narcissistic relationship. Everyone has some gaps in their self-esteem. Everyone likes to be seen and valued, and the narcissists are very good at targeting this need exactly, and to tailor their performative empathy for you so that it functions as a band-aid specifically designed for you, the exact ways you wish to be seen and cherished. For a short moment, they give you exactly the validation that nobody ever gave. The experience can even feel childlike. This is called the idealizing phase in the cycle of abuse. Then they devalue you and take away that initial validation if you do not behave as they want. So, let's assume that the damage already happened. There is no justice. In that situation, where the tax is so high that you go bankrupt, there are still ways that you can get justice. I will describe two ways, so two subcategories under this third category, this third justice principle? Or is it a justice principle or a situation? It is very important that we know where we are in this mind map of categories. I promise that there will not be any third level of subcategories. Stay with me. Treat the narcissist as your best diagnostician. The narcissist sees the inner gaps in you instinctively, even better than you see them yourself. Many narcissists keep an eye open for your vulnerabilities the second they meet you, just in case they would need leverage against you at some point. So, no one will likely be as motivated to diagnose you as the narcissist. They can probably do it more efficiently than any therapist ever could. And many of them do it instinctively. And later, they target those wounds. I am very sorry that this seems to be the case, but experiencing the consequences of your inner psychological gaps seems to be more efficient than sitting in a therapist's office trying to understand your inner processes on a cognitive level. The inner gaps can refer to things such as oversharing, believing that people are always interested and that they have good intentions when they listen to you blabbering about your personal life or trauma or whatever. Or it could be you wanting to be seen in a particular way and enjoying the positive attention from the narcissist for a moment. You are seeing an idealized version of yourself in the eyes of the narcissist. And that mirroring comes from a place of you not being complete within yourself. That mirroring happens in non-narcissistic relationships too, by the way. Or maybe you are looking for people who will validate you in a way that you were never validated as a child. All those things, including the last one, are calls for a disaster. Yet these patterns are so deeply incorporated in our everyday actions that to truly even become aware of them, things need to go really wrong. You need to experience the consequences of all those things. After my own experience, I went through a long process of unlearning on a very practical level. I even removed all the smiles and exclamation marks from any of my text messages and emails for a while. This was to unlearn the immediate impulse of people-pleasing, unlearning superficial niceness. Then I gradually incorporated some smiley faces again, but selectively and not out of necessity. So, where's the justice? The narcissist will continue repeating the same pattern over and over, and when they've burnt too many bridges, they might have to relocate, and they start the same pattern all over again. You, on the other hand, got the most efficient therapy of your life. The second subcategory of this third justice principle. Let's return to this slightly awkward word, trauma bond. You only need to cut it once, and it applies to all the narcissists that came before and any of the future narcissists that may come your way. On social media, there is this expression, a soul contract. And when you dissolve it at your end, you have solved it once and for all. The contract is ended. The version of you that attaches to the specific type of magic that narcissists simulate does not exist anymore. Your tax is paid. You are not in debt anymore. You do not idealize others, anyone, and you do not need anyone to idealize you. If someone does, it does not really even sink in. It creates suspicion, or you don't even really notice it. This is not only a little change that makes you more safe from these relationships in the future. It is incredible. And it affects all your non-narcissistic relationships too. But it might only be possible if there is a long period of isolation where the version of you that carried that way of attaching is completely determined. So this is how you get justice, even when you have to pay the highly unfair narcissism tax. And the good part is that you did not even seek revenge. It is just the natural outcome. In a way, it always already lies at the very core of narcissistic dynamic to begin with. Anyone who needs to be in control of the narrative and dominate over others has already lost. Thank you for watching.